It begins quietly, almost so quietly that you could dismiss it as nothing at all. A fleeting thought in the middle of your morning routine, a moment, while brushing your teeth or staring out the window, when something inside you whispers, "There must be more than this." You can't explain where it comes from, or why it feels so different from your usual daydreams. It doesn't feel like ambition, or boredom, or the usual longing for a change in scenery. It feels older, as if this whisper has been waiting patiently in the background of your life, waiting for the moment when you would finally notice it. At first, you try to ignore it. You go about your days as you always have, meeting deadlines, keeping up with responsibilities, scrolling through endless distractions. But the whisper doesn't fade. If anything, it grows clearer. Not louder exactly, more like it becomes harder to pretend you don't hear it. It's there when you wake up in the middle of the night, for no reason. It's there in the quiet pauses, when no one is talking. It's there in the way your heart tugs at you when you see something as simple as sunlight falling through the trees. The restlessness it brings is unlike the kind you've felt before. It's not the kind that makes you want to pack your bags and move to a new city. It's not about changing jobs or taking a vacation. This restlessness lives somewhere deeper, in a place you didn't even realize could ache. It's a quiet knowing that life as you've been living it, no matter how comfortable, successful, or predictable, is not the whole story. It's the sense that something important has been hidden from you, and you're only just beginning to realize it's there. You start to notice little shifts. Conversations that once felt satisfying now leave you feeling strangely empty. The topics you used to enjoy seem shallow, as if you're speaking in a language that no longer matches what you feel inside. Even your goals, the ones you've spent years chasing, don't hold the same weight they once did. You might still want them, but in the background, another question keeps rising up. Is this really it? For some, this first stirring comes suddenly, brought on by a life-altering event, the loss of someone dear, an unexpected illness, a breakup that shakes the foundation of everything you thought was certain. For others, it's as soft and unassuming as a shift in the wind, a gentle but persistent breeze that keeps brushing against the edges of your awareness. However it arrives, it refuses to leave once it's made itself known. There's an unease to it, and with that unease comes curiosity. You find yourself searching without even knowing what you're looking for. You might start reading books you'd never have considered before, or feel drawn to topics that don't make logical sense but somehow feel important. You might catch yourself staring at the night sky longer than usual, wondering about your place in it all. These aren't the usual escapes you turn to when life feels stale. They're the beginnings of a deeper hunger you don't yet understand. This stage can feel strangely lonely. Not because you're physically alone, but because you realize you're starting to see the world differently than the people around you. You might sit at a table full of friends, laughing and talking as you always have, and yet a part of you feels like you're watching from somewhere far away. It's not that you've stopped caring about them. If anything, you feel more tenderness toward them, but you also sense that something in you is quietly shifting. The loneliness isn't necessarily painful at first. It's more like standing in a doorway between two rooms, not fully in either one. You still remember how it felt to live entirely in the old room, where the rules were simple and the roles were clear, but you can't unsee the other room now. You can't forget that there's more space, more light, more air, and though you haven't stepped fully into it, you know that one day you will have to. Your senses begin to feel different, as if they're tuned to a slightly new frequency. Colors seem richer, music feels more emotional. A conversation overheard in passing might carry an unexpected weight. It's as if your inner world has quietly expanded, and now everything around you is brushing against this new sensitivity. This isn't a mystical vision or a sudden leap into enlightenment. It's the slow, steady widening of your perception, like your eyes adjusting to a light that has been there all along. You start to notice patterns in your life, how certain habits have kept you moving in circles, how certain relationships drain you more than they nurture you, how the things you once chased so fiercely might have been distractions from something deeper you didn't yet have the courage to face. This realization can feel uncomfortable, even a little frightening, but it can also feel strangely liberating, because with it comes the possibility of change. In this beginning stage, you might still cling to the familiar, telling yourself that the whisper will fade, that you can go back to how things were. But deep down, you know the truth. Once this stirring begins, there's no returning to the deep sleep of unawareness. Even if you try to ignore it, the call will wait for you, patient and unyielding. It doesn't demand that you rush forward. It only asks that you pay attention. And perhaps that's the real gift of this first stage. Not answers, not clarity, but the simple, powerful act of noticing. Of realizing that there's more to you, and to life, than you've allowed yourself to see. That even if you can't yet name it, something vast and beautiful has begun to awaken inside you. It will not be hurried, and it will not be silenced. It is the seed of a journey that will unfold in ways you cannot yet imagine, and it begins with nothing more than this, a quiet whisper that says, "There is more." It happens slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, like a hairline crack forming in a mirror. You notice it one day while going about your ordinary routine, and for a moment you dismiss it. But that crack doesn't disappear. Instead, it grows. It spreads across the surface of everything you thought you knew, and before long, you realize you're no longer seeing the world the same way you once did. The structures you relied on, the beliefs you inherited, the identity you built brick by brick over years, they no longer feel solid beneath your feet. There's an unease you can't explain, an unfamiliar restlessness that hums through the background of your daily life. It's as if you've been living inside a house you once thought was home, only to wake up one morning and realize you don't recognize the walls around you anymore. In this stage of awakening, the shattering is rarely gentle. It doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't arrive on a schedule. One day, the beliefs you once defended with certainty start to feel like ill-fitting clothes. The spiritual truths you swore by seem incomplete. The roles you've been playing, the career title, the family expectations, the social masks, suddenly feel like costumes that were never truly yours. You begin to see the invisible scaffolding that has held your reality together, and you start to question who built it and why you agreed to live inside it for so long. At first, the questioning might feel exhilarating. There's a rush of freedom in realizing you are not bound to the definitions and limitations others have placed on you. But the exhilaration quickly gives way to a deeper kind of disorientation. If the map you've been using to navigate life is flawed, then how do you find your way forward? If the truths you've built your identity on are no longer true for you, then who are you without them? This is the part that feels like freefall, not knowing what will catch you, or if anything will at all. It's common in this stage to look around at the life you've created and feel like a stranger in it. The friendships you've maintained for years may no longer feel aligned. The conversations that once engaged you now seem hollow, as though the words are echoing in an empty room. You might notice how much of your life has been built on unexamined assumptions about success, about happiness, about what is possible. These realizations can sting. It's like discovering that the picture you've been painting for years was done on someone else's canvas, according to someone else's outline. There's grief here, too. The shattering of illusions isn't just about letting go of what's false, it's about mourning the parts of yourself that invested in those illusions so completely. You remember the years you spent believing in them, you remember how safe they felt, how certain, and now that they're gone, there's a hollow space in their place. This grief is not a sign you're going backwards. It's part of the clearing that makes space for what's real to enter. During this time, you may also notice how fiercely the mind tries to hold on to what is familiar. Even when you know a belief no longer serves you, there's a strange comfort in its predictability. The mind resists the unknown because the unknown offers no guarantees. It whispers to you that you might be making a mistake, that maybe you should just go back to how things were. But deep down, something in you knows that the old way is no longer an option. The illusion has cracked, and no amount of wishing can make it whole again. Your inner world can feel like a demolition site, rubble where there used to be structure. Some days you may feel impatient to rebuild, desperate to create something new so you can feel stable again. But this stage asks you to resist that impulse. It teaches you that not every gap needs to be filled immediately. Sometimes the most profound growth happens when you allow the empty space to exist without rushing to cover it. This pause, uncomfortable as it is, allows new truths to emerge in their own time. As you question everything, you begin to see how much of your life has been shaped by conditioning, family expectations, cultural narratives, societal standards. You see how you've inherited ways of thinking without ever examining whether they were true for you. It's like waking up from a dream you didn't realize you were having. The stories that used to feel like facts now reveal themselves as perspectives, and you realize you're allowed to choose your own. This is also when trust becomes a fragile but essential lifeline. Trust not in the systems or beliefs that are falling apart, but in the quiet knowing that something deeper is guiding you through the dismantling. Some call it intuition, others call it the voice of the soul. It's subtle, but it's there, a steady pulse underneath the noise of your unraveling identity. Even when you can't see where this is leading, there's a part of you that knows the breaking is not the end. It's the threshold to something more honest. In the shattering of illusions, you will encounter resistance, from within and from others. People around you may be uncomfortable with your questions, especially if they've built their own lives on the same foundations you're now dismantling. You might face judgment, confusion, or even hostility from those who don't understand why you're changing. This is where discernment becomes crucial. Not every opinion is worth taking in. The deeper you go into this stage, the more you realize that approval is a poor substitute for authenticity. The beauty of this stage, though it may be hard to see in the moment, is that it returns you to a place of raw possibility. Without the weight of inherited beliefs and self-imposed roles, you are free to explore who you truly are. It's disorienting, yes, but it's also liberating. The old identity is gone, but that means you are no longer confined by it. You are free to create something truer, something that belongs entirely to you. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to see that the shattering is not random, it's not a punishment or a mistake, it's an act of grace in disguise. Life is stripping away what cannot support the weight of your soul's expansion. It's removing what would limit the truth you're stepping into. And though it may feel like you're losing everything, you are, in reality, being freed from everything that isn't you. So you breathe, you let the walls crumble, you allow yourself to stand in the ruins without rushing to rebuild. And slowly, without forcing it, you start to sense the faint outline of something new forming, not the next illusion, but the beginning of something real. And you realize that maybe the shattering wasn't the end after all. Maybe it was the most important beginning of your life. It does not come gently. The dark night of the soul rarely announces itself with warning or mercy. One day, you may feel like you are standing on familiar ground, and the next, that ground is gone. It is as if the very framework of your life, the beliefs, routines, and roles you have relied on, has been pulled apart, leaving you exposed to a vast and unrelenting emptiness. You wake up in the morning and realize that the things which once gave you purpose now feel hollow. The passions that once burned brightly inside you flicker and fade, as if the wind has stolen their flame. Even the people you love may feel strangely distant, not because they have changed, but because something in you no longer knows how to connect in the same way. This is not ordinary sadness, it is a collapse of meaning itself. You are not simply mourning the loss of a job, a relationship, or a dream. You are mourning the loss of the world as you knew it. The rules that once made sense no longer hold. The stories you told yourself about who you are, why you are here, and how life works now feel flimsy and unconvincing. It is as though the map you have been following for years has suddenly been erased, and all that is left is an unfamiliar landscape you must cross without guidance. The weight of this stage is unlike anything you have felt before. You may find yourself drifting through days without direction, unable to summon the motivation to do even the simplest tasks. You may lie awake at night with questions you cannot answer, or worse, with no questions at all, just a hollow silence where your curiosity once lived. It is an unnerving emptiness, one that makes you feel disconnected from life itself. And yet, somewhere deep inside, there is a quiet awareness that this is not just an ending, it is a stripping away. What is being dismantled is not the truth of who you are, but everything you have mistaken for that truth, the identities you have built to feel safe, the beliefs you have clung to because they were comfortable, the illusions you inherited without ever questioning. The dark night of the soul is the great unraveling of all that is false, and as brutal as it feels, it is a necessary purification. In this place, you can no longer distract yourself with the surface of things. The coping mechanisms that once worked, constant activity, shallow pleasures, rehearsed optimism, no longer provide relief. You might try to cling to them out of habit, but they slip through your fingers like water. This is because the dark night demands honesty. It strips away not only your illusions, but also your defenses, leaving you face to face with the parts of yourself you have avoided, the grief you buried years ago, the fear you disguised as ambition, the anger you silenced because it was inconvenient. At times, this confrontation feels unbearable. You may cry for no apparent reason. You may feel waves of despair that seem to come from nowhere, or moments of panic that rise without warning. The mind will try to make sense of it, searching for a cause, a problem to fix, but often there is no single cause, only the raw process of transformation itself. Your body responds as well. Sleep becomes erratic, either elusive or excessive. Appetite changes. You may experience fatigue, aches, or a heaviness in your chest as though you are carrying an invisible weight. It is tempting in these moments to believe that something is wrong with you, that you are broken or failing, but the truth is that nothing is wrong. This is the very nature of the dark night. It is not a punishment. It is not a sign that you have taken a wrong turn. It is the soul's way of clearing the ground so that something deeper, truer, and more enduring can take root. Think of it as the winter of the inner world, a season where growth is not visible, but where the seeds of transformation are quietly preparing beneath the surface. The mind will resist this. It will try to pull you back to the old ways, to the comfort of what is familiar. It will tell you to push through, to get over it, to find quick fixes. But the dark night cannot be rushed. The more you resist, the longer and more painful it becomes. The only way forward is through. This means allowing yourself to feel what you feel without judgment. To sit in the discomfort without trying to solve it. To surrender, even when every instinct tells you to fight for control. There will be moments when you think it will never end. Days when you are certain you will always feel lost. But slowly, quietly, something begins to shift. You may not even notice it at first. A subtle softening of the heaviness, a faint glimmer of clarity in the fog. Perhaps a moment of genuine peace arises while you are walking in nature or sitting in silence. Perhaps a small act of kindness touches you more deeply than you expect. These moments are not yet the full dawn, but they are signs that it will come. What makes the dark night so transformative is that it breaks your attachment to the false self. It dismantles the identity that is built on external approval, on achievements, on roles and labels. It forces you to question everything you thought defined you. And in doing so, it creates space for the real you to emerge, not the version shaped by fear or expectation, but the self that exists beneath all of that, the self that has been quietly waiting for you to remember it. Eventually, you begin to see that this stage is not only about loss, it is also about liberation. You are being freed from the need to cling to what does not serve you, freed from the endless striving to prove your worth, freed from the noise that kept you from hearing your own truth. This freedom may not feel light at first. In fact, it may feel unbearably heavy, but that is because you are still learning how to live without the weight you once carried. The dark night of the soul will change you. It will strip you of everything you thought you needed, until you are left with nothing but the essence of who you are. And though you may not realize it while you are in the middle of it, that essence is enough, more than enough. It is the foundation upon which you will rebuild your life, not in the image of who you were, but in the truth of who you are becoming. One day, the night will break. The heaviness will lift, not all at once, but steadily, like the slow return of light after a long winter. You will look back and see that the darkness was not your enemy. It was your teacher. It was the fire that burned away the false, leaving only what could not be destroyed. And you will carry that truth with you into the next stage of your awakening, knowing that even in the deepest darkness, something sacred was guiding you all along. It begins like a fire you cannot put out. Once the initial shock of your old world falling apart begins to settle, there is a sudden and almost desperate thirst for something more. It is as if a dam inside you has broken, and everything you thought you knew about life and yourself has been washed away, leaving a raw, open space. Into that space floods a question so persistent, so alive, that it seems to follow you everywhere. What is the truth? You wake up thinking about it. You go to sleep wondering about it. It is no longer enough to live in the half-light of assumptions and borrowed beliefs. You need answers, and you need them with an urgency you can't explain to anyone who hasn't felt it. This hunger is not polite. It is not the kind of curiosity you can indulge in occasionally and set aside when it becomes inconvenient. It drives you to read late into the night, to search for books, videos, and teachings that promise even a glimpse of understanding. You start with whatever crosses your path, a recommendation from a friend, a lecture you find online, a book you discover in a dusty corner of a second-hand shop. Each one feels like a potential key, something that might unlock the door you now realize you've been standing in front of your entire life without ever knowing it was there. In this stage, your life becomes an exploration of spiritual landscapes you never knew existed. You might begin with meditation, only to find yourself experimenting with energy healing, chanting, breathwork, or astrology. One day you're learning about ancient philosophies, the next you're listening to someone speak about the quantum nature of consciousness. You're willing to go anywhere, try anything, just to find that missing piece you can't quite name. This is the season of being a seeker in the purest sense, moving from one source of wisdom to another, gathering fragments of insight like seashells on a shore. There is excitement in this, an almost childlike wonder at discovering how vast the spiritual world is. You realize that what you once believed was all there is barely a fraction of what exists. Every path you explore seems to open 10 more doors, and for a time, it feels like the possibilities are endless. This excitement can be intoxicating, and it carries its own kind of high. You start to feel that maybe the answers are just one more book away, one more retreat, one more conversation with a teacher who truly understands. But there is a shadow here too, one that creeps in slowly and silently. In your eagerness to learn, to absorb, to experience, it becomes easy to mistake movement for progress. You might start jumping from one practice to another without ever staying long enough to let any of them truly change you. The workshops, the retreats, the courses, they become a collection of spiritual souvenirs. You may not notice it at first, but the seeking itself can become another form of consumption, a way of chasing the feeling of discovery rather than actually sitting with what you've found. This is where discernment begins to matter more than you ever realized. The spiritual landscape is as varied as it is vast, and not everything that shines is gold. In your thirst for truth, you may find yourself drawn to teachers or teachings that promise quick fixes or ultimate answers. Some may resonate deeply, while others might only feed the ego's desire for specialness or superiority, and so, a new question arises alongside your search for truth. How do I know what is real for me? The answer to that question cannot be handed to you by anyone else. It must come from the quiet, steady knowing that grows inside you as you move through this stage. You begin to notice that not everything you encounter aligns with your deepest values. You feel it in your body, a constriction in your chest when something feels off, a lightness when it feels right. You start to pay attention to those signals, realizing that discernment is not about judging others but about protecting the integrity of your own path. There will be moments when you feel impatient with yourself. You will want to arrive somewhere, to be done with the searching so you can finally rest in certainty. But the truth is, this stage is not meant to be rushed. The seeking is part of the becoming. Each path you walk, even the ones that turn out not to be yours, shapes your understanding of what you are and what you are not. Every teaching you explore leaves an imprint, even if that imprint is simply the clarity that it's not your way forward. Over time, you begin to notice that your hunger is changing. In the beginning, it was wild and urgent, as if you were trying to drink from every stream you could find. But as you grow, the urgency softens into something more grounded. You start to see that you don't need to chase every new idea, every new method. You realize that truth is not always found in the next thing. Sometimes it is found in staying with what is right in front of you long enough for it to reveal itself. You might settle into one or two core practices that feel like home. Perhaps it's meditation, where you discover that sitting in silence offers more insight than hours of study. Perhaps it's journaling, where your own words surprise you with wisdom you didn't know you carried. Or maybe it's time spent in nature, where you begin to understand that the answers you've been seeking are whispered in the rustle of leaves and the rhythm of the waves. This stage teaches you that the search for answers is not about collecting as much information as possible, but about developing a relationship with yourself that is deep enough to recognize the truth when it appears. You begin to trust that the right teachers will appear when you are ready for them, that the right books will fall into your hands at the right moment. The frantic grasping fades, replaced by a quieter, more trusting exploration. And yet, the seeker's spirit never truly leaves you. Even when you find practices and philosophies that anchor you, there is always a part of you that remains open, curious, willing to be surprised. You no longer seek out of desperation, but out of reverence for the mystery of it all. You understand now that awakening is not about reaching a final destination where all questions are answered. It is about learning to live inside the questions without fear, to see them not as obstacles but as doorways into deeper truth. The search for answers changes you. It stretches your mind beyond its old limits and softens your heart toward what you do not yet understand. It humbles you, reminding you that no single person or path holds the entire truth. And it strengthens you, teaching you how to navigate a world filled with both wisdom and illusion. By the time you move beyond this stage, you will have learned one of the most important lessons of the journey, that the greatest teacher you will ever meet is the one you discover within yourself. It often comes when you least expect it. Not in the middle of a grand meditation retreat, not while you are striving to achieve some kind of spiritual milestone, but in an ordinary moment that feels strangely illuminated from within. You might be walking down a familiar street, noticing the way the sunlight filters through the leaves, when suddenly everything around you feels alive in a way you cannot explain. The air seems sharper, the colors richer, the sounds clearer. There is no mental commentary in the background, no list of things to do tomorrow, no judgment about what is happening. For a few seconds, or maybe only a breath, you are simply here, and the here feels perfect. These first glimpses of truth are fleeting, but their impact is profound. They feel like the breaking of a spell you didn't know you were under. It's as if your mind has stepped aside, and in the space it leaves behind, something vast and still is revealed. You might try to name it peace, presence, awareness, but the moment itself resists definition. All you know is that you feel whole in a way that has nothing to do with circumstances, achievements, or anyone else's approval. The surprising thing is that these moments don't come as a reward for effort in the way the mind expects. You don't earn them through a checklist of spiritual practices, though those practices can prepare the ground. Instead, they arrive in moments of openness, when you're not clinging to the past or reaching for the future. It might happen while you're watching rainfall against the window, or while holding a cup of tea in both hands, or while hearing laughter from a child playing nearby. In that stillness, life reveals itself without the filter of thought, and you realize that what you've been seeking isn't far away, it's right here, beneath the noise you carry in your mind. For a brief time, the usual cravings and fears that drive you seem irrelevant. You are not thinking about what you lack, or what you need to fix, or how others see you. The mind's usual pull into dissatisfaction is quiet, and in that quiet you find something extraordinary. The simple awareness of being alive feels like enough. You understand, perhaps for the first time, that awakening is not about collecting knowledge or achieving some perfect outer life. It's not about winning a prize. It's an inner shift, a change in the way you see and experience the world. Of course, the mind doesn't give up easily. After the moment passes, you may feel it rush back in with questions and analysis. What was that? How can I get it back? Was it even real? This is natural. The mind wants to control the experience, to replicate it, to hold on to it. But the truth is that these glimpses are not meant to be grasped. They are reminders, not possessions. They are like the first small cracks of light in the night sky before dawn. They don't mean the night is gone, but they show you that the light exists, and that it will return. These glimpses can also be unsettling, because they make you aware of how much of your life is spent in distraction. You might notice, with a mix of wonder and sadness, how rare it is to simply be present. This awareness can stir a longing in you, not for more moments like that exactly, but for the quality of being that allows them to happen. that longing is a turning point. It shifts your focus from trying to control the outer world to cultivating a deeper connection with the inner one. There's a stillness beyond thought that these glimpses introduce you to. It is not the blankness of boredom or the passivity of disengagement, but a living stillness, full and vibrant. In this stillness, you are not separate from the world around you. The boundary between you and what you see, hear, and touch feels less rigid. The breeze on your skin feels as much a part of you as your own heartbeat. The sound of a bird's wings becomes your own movement. It's not something you imagine, it's something you simply know in that moment. Even though these glimpses are temporary, they leave a mark that is impossible to forget. Once you have seen the world this way, it changes you. You may return to your routines, your conversations, your responsibilities, but there is a subtle shift beneath it all. You carry a quiet, knowing that there is more to life than the constant chatter of the mind. You may not be able to live in that awareness all the time, but the fact that it exists is enough to guide you forward. This is why the first glimpses are so important. They are proof, not in the form of theories or teachings, but as direct experience. No one can give them to you, and no one can take them away. They do not belong to any philosophy, religion, or teacher. They are your own recognition of what has been here all along. And even if you try to explain them to others, you will realize that words cannot capture them fully. The truth they reveal is felt, not told. Over time, you begin to see that these moments are not as rare as they seemed at first. They were always available, it's just that your attention was elsewhere. The more you value the present moment, the more you notice them. You stop searching for them in extraordinary events, and start finding them in the ordinary: a breath, the texture of your food, the way light spills across the floor, the sound of silence in a room after a conversation ends. You also come to understand that stillness beyond thought is not something you need to create. It's not a state you manufacture with effort. It's already here, like the sky behind the clouds. Your thoughts are the weather, constantly changing, but the stillness is the open space in which they come and go. These glimpses are moments when the clouds part, and you remember the vastness of that space. With this recognition, your relationship to your inner life changes. You stop treating your thoughts as the ultimate authority. You stop believing every story the mind tells you about who you are and what is possible. You realize that there is an awareness in you that is untouched by those stories, and that awareness is the truest part of you. The more you rest in it, even for a few breaths at a time, the more life begins to feel different, lighter, clearer, less burdened by the need to constantly prove or defend yourself. In the days after your first glimpses, you may find yourself moving more slowly, not out of laziness, but because you want to savor the small things. You notice beauty in places you once overlooked. You feel gratitude for moments you might have rushed past before. And while you still face challenges and disappointments, they no longer feel as defining. You've seen, even briefly, that there is a part of you untouched by those ups and downs. It is important to remember that these moments are not the end of the journey. They are not a final arrival, but a doorway. They invite you to explore further, to discover what it means to live more often in that space of awareness. And as you step through that doorway again and again, you begin to realize that the truth you seek is not somewhere far away, waiting to be found. It is woven into the fabric of this moment, this breath, this life you are living right now. There comes a point in your awakening when the search for knowledge is no longer enough. You have read the books, listened to the teachings, explored the practices, and yet you sense that something heavy still lingers inside you. It is not about finding more answers now. It is about clearing the space for truth to live within you. This is when the purging begins. It does not announce itself politely or wait for a convenient moment. It arrives like a tide that pulls everything loose from the shoreline, sweeping away the fragments of who you once were, whether you are ready to release them or not. At first, the process feels like an unraveling. Old wounds you thought you had buried rise to the surface, sometimes triggered by the smallest events. Memories you haven't visited in years return with startling clarity, carrying the emotions you tried so hard to suppress. You might cry for reasons you can't explain. You might feel waves of anger, grief, or fear that seem out of proportion to your present circumstances. This is the body and soul working together to bring what has been hidden into the light, because only what is faced can be released. The purging is not just emotional, it is energetic. You may notice sudden fatigue as if your body is processing something you can't see. Sleep patterns may shift. You might find yourself craving solitude or feeling overwhelmed in situations that never used to bother you. There is a deep internal cleansing taking place, and it demands that you honor the process. This is the time to listen closely to your body's signals, to slow down when it asks you to, and to create space for stillness so the release can happen without resistance. Shadow work becomes a central part of this stage. This is the process of meeting the parts of yourself you've avoided, denied, or judged. It's uncomfortable because it strips away the illusions you've held about your own identity. You see the patterns you inherited from family, the habits you formed to protect yourself, the coping mechanisms that once kept you safe but now keep you small. Shadow work is not about shaming yourself for these aspects, it's about acknowledging them with compassion. You learn that these shadows are not evidence of your brokenness but reflections of the places within you that are asking for healing. As you move deeper into this stage, you begin to notice how your external life mirrors your internal shifts. Relationships may change or end entirely. Certain environments that once felt familiar now feel heavy or draining. You may lose interest in old hobbies or routines that no longer align with your evolving values. It can be disorienting to watch pieces of your life fall away, but this too is part of the purging. The attachments that are not in harmony with who you are becoming cannot remain. Their departure makes space for connections and experiences that match the frequency of your new self. Letting go is rarely a clean or simple act. It can stir feelings of fear, guilt, and even nostalgia for the person you used to be. You may question whether you're making the right choices. You may feel the pull to return to what is familiar just because it is comfortable. But the purging asks you to trust that releasing what no longer serves you is an act of love, not only for yourself, but for everyone connected to you. When you stop holding on to what is misaligned, you create the possibility for something better to emerge, even if you cannot yet see it. This process demands vulnerability, and for many, that is the hardest part. You may have spent years building walls around your heart, protecting yourself from disappointment or betrayal. In the purging, those walls begin to crumble. You find yourself opening to emotions you once avoided, allowing others to see the parts of you you once hid. Vulnerability may feel risky, but you start to discover the quiet power it carries. It is not weakness to show your true self, it is strength, because it takes courage to be seen as you are, without the masks you've worn for protection. There are moments in this stage when you will feel lighter, as though a great weight has been lifted. After an intense release, whether it comes through tears, expression, or silent surrender, you may notice a clarity that wasn't there before. You see situations more honestly, you feel less reactive. The triggers that once consumed you begin to lose their grip. This is the gift of the purging. Each release creates more space within you for peace, for joy, for authenticity. It is important to understand that the purging is not a one-time event. It happens in cycles. You might go through a period of deep clearing, feel stable for a while, and then be called into another round of release. This can be frustrating if you expect healing to be linear. But with each cycle, you notice that you are meeting the process with more grace. You no longer fear the discomfort as much, because you recognize it as a sign of growth. You trust that whatever is leaving you is making room for something more aligned to enter. You may also find that your connection to your own inner wisdom grows stronger during this time. As you release the noise of old beliefs, unresolved pain, and heavy attachments, you can hear your intuition more clearly. It speaks in quiet but steady ways, a feeling in your chest when something is right, a gentle nudge when something is not. This guidance becomes a source of stability as the external aspects of your life shift. It reminds you that even in the midst of letting go, you are never truly empty, you are simply returning to yourself. In the deepest sense, the purging is not about losing anything at all. It is about removing the layers that have kept you from living as the fullest expression of who you are. It is a process of remembering what has always been true beneath the fears, the conditioning, and the illusions. It teaches you that healing is not about becoming someone new, but about shedding what is not you, so that your true self can stand in the light. There will be days when the release feels like a storm, chaotic and exhausting. There will be other days when it feels like a quiet tide, carrying away what no longer belongs with a gentleness you did not expect. Both are sacred. Both are necessary. And in the end, you will find that you have not only survived the purging, you have been transformed by it. You will see that your willingness to face the shadows, to let go of what is misaligned, and to embrace your vulnerability has opened a door to a deeper strength, one that does not depend on control or certainty. When you emerge from this stage, you may not be able to pinpoint the exact moment it happened. There is no single day when you wake up and declare yourself finished. Instead, you simply notice that you feel lighter. You notice that you can breathe more easily in your own skin. You notice that you have more space for love, for truth, for the life you are now ready to live. And you realize that the purging was never about breaking you down, it was about setting you free. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the slow turning of the tide. After the chaos, confusion, and shedding of earlier stages, there is a sense of coming home to yourself. Not to the self you performed for the world, not to the self you shaped to fit expectations, but to something older and deeper, the self that existed before you learned who you were supposed to be. This reconnection doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It arrives gradually, through subtle choices, through the soft but steady pull toward what feels real. It is a return to the inner compass you once trusted as a child, before the noise of the world convinced you to set it aside. For so long, you may have defined yourself through the eyes of others, by their approval, their validation, their comfort. You wore masks without even realizing you had put them on, adjusting your tone, your interests, and even your dreams to match the room you were in. You may have lived a life that looked fine from the outside, but deep inside there was a constant tension, a quiet ache that told you something didn't fit. That ache was the voice of your authentic self, patient but persistent, waiting for you to listen. Now, after all the stripping away, you can finally hear it clearly. This is not about becoming someone new, it's about remembering who you've been all along. You begin to recognize your true values, not the ones inherited from your family, culture, or the roles you've played, but the ones that resonate in your bones. They may be values you've always held deep down, kindness, honesty, freedom, creativity, but now they are no longer negotiable. You feel them as the ground beneath your feet, guiding every step. Living from this place requires a different kind of honesty, one that is not just about telling the truth to others, but telling the truth to yourself. It means admitting when something you're doing doesn't align with what you believe in, even if it's comfortable or profitable. It means noticing when you're tempted to fall back into old patterns of pleasing or performing, and choosing differently. It means allowing yourself to be seen as you are, even if that means being misunderstood. There is a kind of relief in this. You no longer have to hold up the weight of false identities. You no longer have to remember which version of yourself you showed to which person. There is only one version now, the real one. And though living as your authentic self can sometimes feel risky, it is also profoundly freeing. The energy you once spent maintaining appearances is now available for living, creating, and connecting in ways that nourish you. Reconnection with your authentic self also changes how you make decisions. Before, you may have chosen based on what was expected of you, or on what seemed safest. Now, you find yourself listening for the quiet yes or no in your body and heart. This is your inner compass speaking, and the more you trust it, the clearer it becomes. Sometimes it will lead you toward opportunities that others don't understand. Sometimes it will guide you away from paths that look promising but don't feel right. You begin to see that your inner guidance has a wisdom beyond what logic or social norms can offer. This doesn't mean life becomes instantly easy. In fact, living in alignment with your true nature often means making choices that disrupt the old order. You might step away from relationships, careers, or commitments that no longer fit. You might speak truths that others are not ready to hear. You might let go of goals you've been chasing for years, not because you failed to reach them, but because they are no longer yours to chase. There can be grief in this letting go, but there is also lightness. Every time you release what is false, you make more space for what is true. You also notice that integrity feels different now. It's not just about following rules or keeping promises, it's about a deep alignment between what you think, what you say, and what you do. When those three are in harmony, there is a quiet strength within you. You feel rooted, steady, and unshakable, not because life has stopped throwing challenges at you, but because you are no longer betraying yourself to meet them. Your relationships shift in this stage as well. You are less drawn to connections built on convenience or shared distractions, and more drawn to those where you can show up fully as yourself. The people who remain in your life are the ones who see and accept you without needing you to shrink, pretend, or play a role. You may have fewer relationships than before, but they are deeper, richer, and more nourishing. In turn, you offer others the same freedom you've claimed for yourself, the freedom to be real. Reconnecting with your authentic self also awakens your creativity. When you're no longer filtering your expression through the fear of judgment, ideas flow more freely. You feel inspired to create, not for approval or recognition, but for the joy of bringing something genuine into the world. This creativity might take the form of art, writing, building, problem-solving, or simply the way you live your life. Every choice becomes a kind of art, a way of shaping your outer world to reflect your inner truth. There is a humility in this stage too. You see that your authentic self is not about being flawless or superior, it's about being whole, which means embracing your flaws as well as your strengths. You stop trying to present a polished, curated version of yourself. You allow the messy, uncertain, imperfect parts to be part of the picture. And in doing so, you find that people often connect more deeply with your authenticity than they ever did with your perfection. You may find yourself spending more time alone during this period, not out of loneliness, but because solitude allows you to hear yourself clearly. Time in nature, quiet mornings, or simply sitting without distraction becomes sacred. These are the spaces where you can check in with yourself, realign if you've drifted, and strengthen the bond with your own heart. Over time, you realize that this reconnection is not a one-time event, it is an ongoing practice. Life will always present opportunities to slip back into old habits of self-betrayal. There will always be pressures to conform, to compromise, to seek external validation, but now you have a foundation. You know the difference between living in alignment and living out of fear. And once you've felt the clarity and peace that comes from honoring your authentic self, it becomes harder and harder to walk any other way. This stage is not about arriving at some final, perfect version of you. It is about committing to the journey of living truthfully, moment by moment. It is about trusting that your life will unfold in the right direction when it is guided from within. And as you continue to listen to that inner compass, you discover that the path it leads you on may not always be the easiest, but it is always the most real. That reality, in all its beauty and challenge, is where your freedom lives. It is where your deepest fulfillment begins to take root. And it is the place you were always meant to return to, the home you carry within yourself. There comes a moment in the journey when the world around you begins to feel different, though nothing in its outer appearance has truly changed. You start noticing small coincidences that seem too precise to be random, a phrase you needed to hear spoken by a stranger in passing, a book falling from a shelf at exactly the right time, a message arriving the very moment you were thinking of the person who sent it. At first, you might dismiss these moments as chance, but they keep happening. They gather in frequency and in clarity until you can no longer ignore them. Something is speaking to you through the fabric of reality itself, and for the first time, you feel yourself listening. The awakening of intuition is not about suddenly gaining a new sense you didn't have before. It's about realizing that this inner compass has always been there, quietly guiding you beneath the noise of your mind. In the past, you may have felt these subtle nudges but brushed them aside in favor of reason, practicality, or the opinions of others. Now, you begin to sense that these quiet signals are not random impulses but meaningful threads pulling you toward what you need to know, where you need to go, and who you need to meet. You feel less like you are walking alone through life, and more like you are moving in collaboration with something larger, something wise and patient that sees far beyond what your eyes can perceive. At first, trusting this inner voice can feel strange, even risky. Logic has been your anchor for so long, and it demands evidence and explanation before it allows you to take a step. Intuition offers neither. It speaks in feelings, images, sensations, and an unshakable sense of knowing that cannot always be justified on paper. You may find yourself standing at a crossroads where every logical sign points one way, yet something in you whispers to choose another. It is here, in those moments, that the awakening of intuition asks for your courage. It is not about disregarding reason entirely, but about learning to let your inner knowing sit at the head of the table when it matters most. You start to realize that intuition often speaks through the body. There is a tightness in your chest when something is off, a warmth or lightness in your core when something is right. You notice the subtle shift in your energy when you walk into certain spaces or stand beside certain people. Some rooms feel expansive, welcoming, alive. Others feel heavy, constricting, even if nothing obvious explains it. You begin to trust these impressions, understanding that they are your internal guidance system reading the unseen currents of energy around you. As your sensitivity sharpens, synchronicities become a language all their own. You might see repeating numbers on clocks, license plates, or receipts, each one arriving at a moment that feels charged with meaning. You may encounter symbols or images that seem to follow you, a particular animal, a color, a phrase, and you know instinctively that they are signposts. This is life speaking to you in a form beyond words, a dialogue between your inner awareness and the intelligence woven through everything. The more you acknowledge these signs, the more they appear, as if the universe is leaning closer, encouraged by your willingness to listen. In the early stages, it is natural to question yourself. You might wonder if you are imagining these patterns, if you are simply finding meaning where there is none. But over time, you notice that when you follow your intuition, life seems to align more gracefully. The right opportunities open, the wrong doors close before you can step through them. The people you need appear, often without effort. Even the challenges you face seem to carry a hidden order, leading you to exactly the growth or change you were ready for. With each of these experiences, your trust deepens, and the voice of doubt grows quieter. You begin to see that intuition does not only guide you toward the pleasant or easy path. Sometimes it nudges you toward discomfort because it knows there is something vital waiting there. It may lead you to have a difficult conversation, to leave a familiar situation, or to take a leap into the unknown. These moments can feel like tests, but in truth, they are invitations to step into the version of yourself you are becoming. Intuition is not concerned with your temporary comfort. It is devoted to your deeper alignment. In this stage, you might also notice an increased ability to sense the emotional states of others without them saying a word. You can feel when someone is hiding sadness behind a smile, or when they are radiating joy that lifts the entire room. You might pick up on unspoken tensions, subtle shifts in tone, or undercurrents in conversations that others seem to miss. This empathic awareness can be overwhelming at times, especially if you have not yet learned how to protect and balance your own energy. But as you grow, you understand that this sensitivity is not a burden. It is a gift that allows you to connect more deeply and respond with greater compassion. There is a rhythm to living with intuition as your guide. Some days it speaks loudly and clearly, directing you with a clarity that leaves no doubt. Other days, it whispers faintly, asking you to quiet yourself enough to hear. It becomes a practice of tuning in, of making space in your mind and body for its voice to be heard. You may find that time in nature, meditation, journaling, or simply moments of stillness help to clear the static so you can receive its guidance more easily. As your relationship with intuition matures, you stop demanding that it provide the full map before you take a step. You learn to move with partial instructions, trusting that the next piece will reveal itself when you are ready. This is one of the great lessons of this stage, that guidance is often given one step at a time, not because the path ahead is hidden, but because you are being invited to live in the present moment, to trust the unfolding without needing to control it. The awakening of intuition changes the way you see life itself. You begin to understand that you are part of a conversation that is always happening between your inner world and the world around you. Every interaction, every event, every pause carries meaning if you are willing to notice it. The boundaries between spiritual and ordinary dissolve, and you see that every moment is alive with guidance, whether it comes through a quiet feeling, a symbolic dream, a chance encounter, or the simple knowing that arrives without warning. Over time, you come to rely on this inner guidance not as a rare occurrence, but as the natural way of navigating your life. Decisions feel less like mental calculations, and more like alignments between your energy and the direction you are being called toward. You stop forcing outcomes that do not feel right, even if they look good on paper. You allow yourself to be led by a deeper wisdom, one that sees the full picture even when you cannot. And in doing so, you discover that life flows more easily when you walk in partnership with it rather than trying to control its every turn. By the time you move forward from this stage, intuition has shifted from being something you occasionally notice to being the quiet foundation of your days. You trust it not because it guarantees an easy path, but because it always leads you to the one that is most true for you. And as you follow it, you realize that this inner voice, this steady, patient, and unwavering guide, is not separate from you at all. It is the deepest part of you, the part that has been waiting all along for you to hear it, trust it, and let it lead you home. There comes a point on the path when you realize that no matter how hard you try, you cannot bend life entirely to your will. You may have spent years, maybe decades, carefully arranging your circumstances, setting goals, making plans, and taking every precaution to protect yourself from disappointment. Yet life, in its unpredictable way, has shown you that even your most carefully constructed designs can unravel in a moment. At first, this realization feels like defeat. It feels as if the ground has been pulled from beneath your feet, leaving you helpless. But as you sit in that space, stripped of the illusion of control, something unexpected begins to happen. You discover that surrender is not the same as giving up. It is not about becoming passive or indifferent. It is about stepping into a deeper trust, one that doesn't depend on knowing what comes next. Releasing the need to control every outcome is not an easy process. Your mind has been trained to believe that safety lies in certainty, that peace is only possible when you can predict the path ahead. Letting go of this belief feels dangerous at first, like you are abandoning the steering wheel while still moving at full speed. The urge to cling, to grasp, to make things happen on your own timeline is strong. But as you loosen your grip, you begin to feel the subtle relief that comes when you are no longer carrying the weight of the universe on your shoulders. You realize that control was always an illusion, and that much of your suffering came from the tension of trying to hold together something that was never meant to be held. Accepting uncertainty is perhaps the most challenging and liberating part of this stage. You are taught from an early age to fear the unknown, to fill every empty space with plans, to chase the security of guarantees. But the truth is, life has never been certain. The future has always been unwritten, no matter how tightly you tried to script it. When you stop fighting this truth, when you allow uncertainty to exist without seeing it as an enemy, something shifts. The unknown stops feeling like a void to be avoided and starts feeling like a field of infinite possibilities. You may not know what is coming, but you begin to sense that it is not your job to know. Your role is to be present, open, and ready to respond when the moment arrives. This is where the divine plan begins to reveal itself, not in the sense of a rigid blueprint, but as a living, breathing flow that you are a part of. You start to notice the way certain events, meetings, and opportunities arrive in perfect timing, often without your interference. You see how detours you once resented led you to places and people you would have never found otherwise. You recognize that some of your greatest growth came not from things going according to plan, but from the moments when everything fell apart and you had to rebuild from a deeper place. Gradually, you begin to trust that there is an intelligence at work far greater than your own, one that sees the whole picture when you can only see a fragment. Surrender does not mean abandoning your dreams or refusing to take action. It means showing up fully for life, without trying to control how it unfolds. It means taking the steps that feel right in the present moment, while letting go of your attachment to how those steps should turn out. You can plant the seeds, tend the soil, and water the ground, but you cannot force the flower to bloom on your schedule. You begin to understand that your task is to align with the rhythm of life, not to wrestle it into submission. There is a deep peace that begins to emerge when you stop resisting what is. You may still have preferences and hopes, but you are no longer destroyed when things don't match them. You can meet life where it is, instead of where you think it should be. This peace doesn't come from the absence of challenge, but from the absence of constant struggle against the way things are. It is the quiet that comes when you realize you don't have to fight every current. You can let the river carry you, trusting that it knows where it's going. Letting go in this way requires humility. It means admitting that you do not have all the answers, that your vision of what is best may be incomplete. This humility doesn't make you powerless, it makes you receptive. When you release the need to force your way, you create space for life to surprise you. You make room for grace to enter in ways you could not have orchestrated on your own. There will still be moments when your instinct to control resurfaces. Old habits die hard, and fear will sometimes try to pull you back into the familiar pattern of overthinking and micromanaging. But now, you have experienced the freedom that comes with letting go, and it becomes easier to recognize when you are gripping too tightly. In those moments, you can pause, take a breath, and choose again. You can remind yourself that the same force that moves the tides, opens the flowers, and turns the seasons is guiding your life as well. As surrender deepens, you notice that your relationship with time changes. You are no longer constantly leaning into the future, trying to make it arrive faster, or dragging the past with you into every decision. You start living more fully in the present because you trust that this moment contains everything you need for the next step. This doesn't mean you never plan or prepare, but your plans are lighter now, more flexible. You hold them like an open hand rather than a clenched fist. The more you surrender, the more life begins to feel like a collaboration rather than a battle. You are still an active participant, but you are working with the flow instead of against it. You take inspired action when it feels right, and you rest when it's time to rest, without guilt. You begin to see challenges not as punishments, but as invitations to grow. You find meaning even in the detours and delays. And perhaps the greatest gift of this stage is that you begin to feel safe within yourself, regardless of what is happening outside of you. Your security no longer depends on everything going your way. You carry your peace with you because it is rooted in trust, not in circumstances. You know that whatever comes, you will meet it, and that even the unexpected will carry its own form of wisdom. In the end, sacred surrender is not about losing control. It is about gaining freedom. It is the freedom to live without the constant anxiety of trying to hold the whole world together. It is the freedom to be guided rather than driven, to respond rather than react, to trust rather than fear. And in that freedom, you discover that life has been waiting to carry you all along, if only you would release your grip and let it. There comes a time in your spiritual journey when the urgency to seek begins to soften. The hunger that once drove you to search endlessly for answers transforms into something steadier, more grounded. It's not that the questions have disappeared, it's that you no longer feel frantic to resolve them. You've come to realize that life itself is the teacher, and that wisdom is not always found in the next book, the next course, or the next retreat, but in the way you live moment to moment. This is the stage of integration and embodiment, when everything you have learned stops being a concept and becomes a lived reality. In the earlier stages, you might have felt a clear divide between your spiritual life and your everyday life. There were the moments of deep meditation, sacred study, and inner breakthroughs, and then there was the commute to work, the bills to pay, the conversations over coffee. Now, that separation begins to dissolve. The insight you've gained doesn't stay confined to the cushion or the journal. It shows up in how you respond when someone tests your patience, in how you speak to a stranger, in how you handle disappointment and uncertainty. You start to see that the truest measure of spiritual growth is not what happens in the stillness, but what you carry from it into the movement of your days. This shift happens gradually. At first, you may still catch yourself treating your spiritual practice as something separate from your real life. But over time, you notice that the lessons you've learned begin to weave themselves into your thoughts and actions without conscious effort. Where you once reacted with defensiveness, you now pause and breathe. Where you once rushed to fill silence, you now feel comfortable letting it stretch. Where you once clung to control, you now trust in timing. These are not just ideas you read about, they are lived truths, etched into your way of being. Integration is not about perfection. You will still have moments when old patterns resurface, when you lose your footing, when you forget what you know. The difference now is that you recover faster. You catch yourself in the middle of an old habit and choose differently, not out of self-judgment, but out of love for who you are becoming. You start to see those slips as opportunities, reminders that growth is a process and that embodying your truth is a lifelong practice. There is also a humility that comes with this stage. In the seeking phase, it's easy to become infatuated with new insights, to want to share them with everyone, to feel as if you've discovered something that will change the world if only people would listen. But integration teaches you that wisdom is not something you have to force on anyone. The most powerful way to share what you've learned is to live it. When people witness peace, kindness, authenticity, and presence in you, they feel it. It inspires curiosity far more than any lecture or debate could. You realize you don't need to convince anyone of anything. You only need to embody what you know to be true. This stage can feel quieter than the ones that came before. There are fewer dramatic revelations, fewer intense shifts. Instead, there is a deepening. The roots of your practice grow stronger, even if no one else can see them. Your sense of connection, to yourself, to others, to the world, feels less like something you have to reach for, and more like the natural state you return to over and over. You don't need to chase experiences to feel alive anymore. You find richness in the simple, ordinary moments, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of rain at night, the smile of someone you pass on the street. Living in this way requires presence. You begin to realize that the past and future hold far less power over you than they once did. You still make plans, you still remember and reflect, but you spend more of your energy in the here and now. You understand that this moment, this breath, is the only place where life is actually happening. When you inhabit it fully, even the smallest actions can become sacred. Washing the dishes becomes a meditation. Drinking a cup of tea becomes a prayer. The line between spiritual practice and daily routine disappears, and everything becomes part of the same whole. There is also a deep trust that emerges in this stage. You stop grasping for certainty about what's coming next. You stop needing to know the outcome before you take a step. You've learned, often through difficulty, that life has a way of unfolding exactly as it needs to, even if you can't see the reason in the moment. This trust doesn't mean you stop making choices or setting intentions. It means you no longer push against the flow of what is. You act from alignment, and then you let go. This letting go brings a profound sense of peace. You're no longer driven by the need to prove yourself, to be right, or to achieve some imagined ideal of who you should be. You've stopped measuring your worth by external markers. You know now that you are enough as you are, not because you've reached some spiritual milestone, but because your value has never depended on anything outside of you. This self-acceptance becomes the foundation for everything else, for how you treat yourself, how you treat others, and how you meet the challenges of life. The embodiment of your spiritual insights also changes the way you engage with the world around you. You see more clearly how your choices ripple outward. You understand that the way you speak to a cashier, the way you listen to a friend, the way you tend to your own energy, all contribute to the collective energy of the world. You no longer underestimate the impact of small acts of kindness, patience, and understanding. You realize that changing the world is not always about grand gestures, it's about the way you show up in each interaction, in each moment. You may find that your definition of spiritual evolves in this stage. It becomes less about the practices themselves and more about the state of being they cultivate. Meditation, prayer, rituals, and study are still valuable, but they are not the point. They are tools to help you live in alignment. The goal is not to accumulate spiritual experiences, but to live as a clear, open, and compassionate expression of your soul. Over time, the integration becomes so natural that you may forget there was ever a time when you lived differently. This doesn't mean the journey is over. In truth, it never is. There will always be new layers to explore, new depths to embody, but you have reached a place where the seeking is no longer fueled by a sense of lack. You are not chasing something outside yourself to fill an emptiness. You seek now out of curiosity, out of love for the unfolding, out of reverence for the mystery. When you look back, you see how far you've come, not just in what you've learned, but in who you've become. You see how the insights that once felt fragile have been woven into the fabric of your life, how they guide your choices without you having to think about them. You see that the truth you were searching for has been here all along, not in some distant place or future moment, but in the way you choose to live today. And so you walk forward, not as someone who is done growing, but as someone who knows how to grow in alignment. You carry your wisdom quietly, like a light that doesn't need to announce itself. You know that your life is the message, your presence, the offering. You no longer need to seek as desperately, because you have become the embodiment of what you once sought. And in living it, you discover that the journey is not about reaching a final destination, but about becoming a living, breathing expression of truth in every step you take. It begins as a quiet pull, almost like a gentle nudge from within that you can't ignore. You have walked through the fires of your own transformation, stumbled through the darkness, and glimpsed the light that lies beyond. Somewhere along the way, this light began to settle into you, not as something you hoard, but as something that naturally wants to move outward. It's not about saving the world in some grand or heroic way. It's about the unmistakable feeling that what you've gained is not yours to keep. The wisdom, the healing, the shifts in perception that have changed your life are now ready to become a gift for others, even if you don't yet know exactly how to give it. This calling to serve doesn't come from obligation or from a need to prove your worth. In fact, it's free from the restless energy that once drove you to achieve or impress. It feels softer, steadier, and yet more powerful than any ambition you've known. You realize that your presence itself can be an offering, the way you listen to someone without judgment, the way you encourage another's dreams without trying to control them, the way your authenticity gives others permission to drop their own masks. Service from the heart is not always about doing more. Often it is about being more fully who you are. As you begin to serve in this way, the ego may still try to get involved. It may whisper that your efforts should be noticed, praised, or rewarded. It may compare your contributions to those of others, trying to measure your value by the size of your impact. But the deeper you move into this stage, the more you see that recognition is irrelevant. The seed you plant in one moment of kindness may grow in ways you will never see. The truth of service lies in the offering itself, not in the acknowledgement it receives. There is a quiet joy in giving simply because it feels right, without expectation of return. This doesn't mean you erase yourself or ignore your own needs. In fact, serving from the heart requires that you remain rooted in your own well-being. You've learned by now that depletion serves no one. You can only offer your light when you keep your own flame tended. So, you balance giving with receiving, action with rest, outward focus with inward renewal. You understand that you are part of the collective you serve, and that caring for yourself is also an act of service. The beauty of this stage is that it reshapes your definition of contribution. Service is not confined to charity work, formal teaching, or public acts. It might look like raising your children with love and awareness. It might be the quiet work you do to keep your home peaceful. It might be the way you share your story with someone who is struggling so they know they are not alone. It might be how you infuse your art, your craft, your work, with intention and compassion. No act is too small when it is done with a sincere heart. In serving without ego, you begin to see the interconnectedness of everything. You notice how one kind word can ripple outward, touching lives you will never meet. You see how your growth influences those around you, even if you never speak a word about it. When you choose to live in alignment with your deepest values, you subtly shift the energy of every space you enter. Others may not consciously realize it, but they feel it. In this way, your journey becomes a contribution in itself. There is also a humility that comes with this stage. You no longer see yourself as separate from those you serve. You are not above them, offering help from a position of superiority. You are walking alongside them, simply sharing what you have learned on your path. Sometimes you will be the one offering guidance, Other times, you will be the one receiving it. Service from the heart recognizes that everyone is both student and teacher, and that wisdom flows in all directions. The longer you live in this space, the more you notice that service is not limited to moments of intentional giving. It weaves itself into the fabric of your daily life, the way you speak to a cashier, the patience you extend in traffic, the compassion you offer to yourself when you make a mistake. These moments matter just as much as any grand gesture, because they come from the same source, the awareness that every interaction is an opportunity to contribute something good to the whole. And while you serve without attachment to recognition, there is a deep fulfillment that comes from knowing you are living in alignment with your purpose. This fulfillment is different from pride. It's not the fleeting rush of approval, but a steady warmth that comes from being part of something larger than yourself. You feel connected to the web of life in a way that makes even the smallest actions meaningful. As this stage deepens, you may notice that the desire to serve becomes as natural as breathing. It is no longer something you think about or plan for, it simply happens. You hold open the door. You speak the words someone needed to hear. You lend your time or resources without hesitation. The acts themselves may be simple, but the energy behind them is profound. In every offering, you are affirming that we are all in this together, that your well-being is tied to the well-being of others. There is a paradox here. The more you give without seeking, the more abundance seems to flow into your life. It may not always come in the form of money or material gain, but it shows up as connection, joy, opportunity, and a sense of being supported by life itself. You begin to see that service is not a one-way street, it is a cycle. As you give, you receive. As you lift others, you are lifted. The energy you put into the world returns to you, often in ways you could not have predicted. In the end, service from the heart is less about what you do, and more about the intention you bring to it. It's about living in a way that leaves the world, or at least one person's world, a little better than you found it. It's about understanding that your journey is not just for you, but for everyone you touch along the way. And as you continue to walk this path, you realize that the heart of service is not sacrifice, but love. Love that is generous, love that is unmeasured, love that moves through you, because it cannot be contained. This is the quiet revolution of the soul, the moment when your light becomes a beacon, not because you set out to shine, but because it is simply who you have become. There comes a point on the path when something inside you shifts so profoundly that it changes the way you perceive everything. It is not a thought, not an idea, not even an insight you can fully articulate. It is an experience, a felt sense that you are not separate from anything or anyone. The boundaries you once believed were so solid begin to dissolve. You can still see them with your eyes, but they no longer hold the same truth they once did. It is as though you have stepped into a deeper layer of reality, one in which the connections between all things are illuminated, undeniable, and alive. In the early stages of awakening, you may have glimpsed this interconnectedness in fleeting moments. A walk in nature where you felt the trees breathing with you. A conversation where you and another person seemed to merge in perfect understanding. An act of kindness that rippled through you like a wave. But now, it is no longer occasional. It is a steady presence, a constant hum beneath every experience. You begin to sense that the life within you is the same life flowing through everyone and everything. The divisions you were taught to see, between yourself and others, between humans and nature, between one group and another, begin to look like illusions, fragile constructs of the mind. With this awareness comes a profound softening. The judgments you once held so tightly start to loosen their grip. It becomes harder to see someone as other when you feel their essence as part of your own. Even when someone acts from fear, ignorance, or pain, you can sense the spark of life within them that is no different from yours. This does not mean you excuse harmful behavior, but your response to it changes. You find yourself less inclined to retaliate and more inclined to seek understanding. Compassion becomes less of a virtue you strive for, and more of a natural state that arises from knowing you are looking at another expression of the same source. Love also takes on a new dimension in this stage. It is no longer confined to romance, family, or friendship. It becomes a constant, expansive presence that flows through you toward all life. You can feel it when you watch the sun set, when you hold a child, when you see the resilience of a flower growing through concrete. This love is not dependent on liking or agreeing with someone. It is not about deserving. It is unconditional because it recognizes that at the deepest level, there is no separation. What you offer to another, you offer to yourself, because you are one and the same. Living from unity consciousness changes your priorities. You begin to care less about personal gain if it comes at the expense of the whole. Decisions are no longer made purely for your own benefit, but for the benefit of the greater web you are part of. You start to see the impact of your actions in a wider context. How you treat the earth, how you speak to others, how you handle resources, all of it becomes part of your spiritual practice. It is not about obligation, but about alignment. When you act in harmony with the whole, you feel that harmony inside yourself. When you act against it, you feel the dissonance immediately. This awareness can bring both joy and responsibility. On one hand, it is liberating to realize you are supported by the entire fabric of life. You are never truly alone, because you are part of something vast and eternal. On the other hand, you see more clearly the ways in which disconnection, greed, and fear harm the whole, and you know that healing begins with you. Your personal growth is no longer just about your own liberation, but about contributing to the healing of the collective. Every time you choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, generosity over scarcity, you are not just changing your own life, you are affecting the entire field of consciousness. There is also a deep sense of peace that comes with this stage. You stop fighting so hard to prove yourself, to set yourself apart, to stand above or ahead of others. You understand that your worth is not measured in comparison, because there is no competition in oneness. The success of another does not diminish you, just as your growth does not diminish them. In fact, the more each individual flourishes, the more the whole flourishes, and that includes you. This understanding dissolves much of the envy, resentment, and insecurity that once plagued your mind. The way you listen changes too. You are no longer just hearing words, you are attuning to the life force speaking through another. You can sense the fear behind anger, the longing behind criticism, the love behind awkward gestures. This kind of listening requires presence and humility, but it also opens the door to deeper connections than you ever imagined possible. You begin to see that every interaction is an exchange of energy, and when you meet others from the space of unity, those exchanges become opportunities for healing and growth on both sides. Even your relationship with the natural world transforms. You stop seeing it as something outside of you, a backdrop or a resource, and begin to experience it as part of your own body. The rivers are your blood, the trees your lungs, the soil your bones. When the earth suffers, you feel it in your own energy. When it thrives, you feel nourished. This awareness naturally leads to more mindful choices, not because you are following a set of rules, but because you can no longer harm what you recognize as yourself. In unity consciousness, there is still individuality, but it is understood in the context of the whole. You still have your unique gifts, your personal preferences, your distinct path, but they are no longer used to separate you from others. Instead, they become your way of serving the whole, your particular thread in the vast tapestry of existence. And you begin to see that everyone else is playing their part too, even if their path looks entirely different from yours. There is a deep respect for diversity, because you understand that the whole is made richer by the variety of its expressions. This stage does not make you immune to pain. In fact, you may feel the suffering of others more acutely than ever. But you also understand that the same love that connects you to their pain connects you to the possibility of their healing. You no longer feel helpless in the face of the world's challenges, because you know that your consciousness is part of the collective field. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every choice to live in alignment, sends ripples through that field. You may not see the results immediately, but you trust that they are real. Over time, this way of seeing and living becomes second nature. The sense of separation that once seemed so real now feels like a distant dream you've awakened from. You no longer have to remind yourself to practice compassion, to choose love, to act in harmony. It flows naturally, because it is simply the truth of who you are. And in that truth, you find a freedom that no external circumstance can touch. You are not just living your life anymore, you are living as life itself, aware of your place in the endless, interconnected dance of all that is. And perhaps the most beautiful part of unity consciousness is that it never truly ends. There is always more depth to explore, more ways to express love, more connections to honor. The circle keeps expanding, and with it, your capacity to see yourself in everything and everything in yourself. You realize that awakening is not about rising above the world, but about sinking so deeply into it that you can feel its heartbeat as your own. And in that knowing, you finally understand what it means to be whole. At some point, after all the breakthroughs and all the lessons, you begin to notice something you didn't expect. The path is not a straight line. You may have imagined awakening as a climb toward a single, shining summit, a place where all confusion ends and all challenges dissolve. But the longer you walk this road, the more you see that awakening is less like a staircase and more like a spiral. You find yourself revisiting old territory, emotions you thought you had healed, patterns you thought you had released, questions you thought you had answered. At first, this can feel discouraging, as if you've slipped backward. But with time, you realize something profound. You are not returning to the same place you started. You are meeting these old stages again, but from a higher vantage point, with deeper understanding and a softer heart. This is the nature of the eternal spiral. Each loop brings you face to face with themes you've met before: loss, surrender, doubt, self-discovery, but the encounters are not the same. What once felt unbearable now feels navigable. What once left you lost in confusion now offers you a strange clarity, as if you can see the edges of the storm even while standing inside it. You've grown in ways you didn't recognize until these familiar challenges reappeared, and now you meet them with tools, awareness, and strength you didn't have before. You start to see that the spiral itself is a form of grace. Life gives you the chance to revisit what still needs tending, not to punish you, but to refine you. When you return to a place of grief, you find you can sit with it longer without trying to escape. When you return to uncertainty, you find that you can stand in it without forcing an answer. When you return to the work of healing, you do it with more compassion for yourself, understanding that you are not broken, you are simply evolving in layers. There is a rhythm to this process. Expansion, contraction, expansion again. Moments of insight followed by moments of forgetting, followed by even deeper remembering. You learn to trust that the contractions are not failures, but necessary pauses, times when you integrate what you've learned before moving forward again. Just as the seasons turn, your inner life moves through its own cycles, each one carrying you further into the truth of who you are. One of the most freeing realizations of this stage is that there is no final arrival. You stop striving for a finish line that doesn't exist. Instead, you embrace the understanding that you are always arriving, always unfolding into the next version of yourself. There will always be more to learn, more to release, more to awaken to. And far from being exhausting, this becomes exhilarating. It means you will never run out of mystery, never run out of wonder, never run out of opportunities to grow into more love, more wisdom, more freedom. The spiral also deepens your humility. You no longer expect yourself to be immune to struggle, nor do you expect to reach a place where nothing can touch you. You accept that challenges will still come, but you trust that each one will meet a version of you who is better equipped than before. You see how each turn of the spiral has strengthened you, softened you, and opened you in ways you didn't know were possible. And with this humility comes a gentleness toward others, because you recognize that they, too, are walking their own spirals, looping through lessons in their own timing and in their own way. There is also a quiet wisdom in knowing that nothing is wasted. Even the times when you resisted the journey, when you clung to the familiar or turned away from growth, are part of the spiral. You see now that the moments you once labeled as detours or mistakes were simply necessary curves in the path, bringing you to the exact place you needed to be to take the next step. This understanding frees you from the weight of regret. You don't have to fight your history. You can meet it with gratitude, knowing it all belongs. As you embrace the spiral, your relationship with time begins to change. You no longer feel the same urgency to get there quickly, because you understand there is nowhere to get except deeper into the present. You live more willingly in the now, trusting that whatever the next loop brings will be met when it comes. This presence doesn't make the journey static, it makes it alive. Each moment becomes its own threshold, its own turning in the spiral, full of potential for awakening. There is a kind of spaciousness that opens when you stop demanding permanence from life. You see that everything is in motion: thoughts, emotions, relationships, even the sense of self you carry. Instead of resisting this motion, you begin to dance with it. When joy comes, you savor it without clinging. When sorrow comes, you let it pass through without believing it will stay forever. You understand that both will return in different forms, and that each return will bring you closer to the heart of life itself. The spiral also teaches you to trust the intelligence of your own soul. Even when you can't see the whole pattern, you sense that there is meaning in the repetition. Just as a spiral seashell builds upon each previous curve, your soul builds upon each lesson, each revelation, each surrender. The path may wind and bend, but it is always carrying you upward and inward at the same time, drawing you closer to the truth that has been at the center all along. Eventually, you stop thinking of awakening as something you achieve and start seeing it as something you live. You no longer measure your progress by how far you've traveled from your starting point, but by how deeply you can meet whatever is here. You might be standing in the same outer circumstances you once found unbearable, but now you move through them with grace and clarity. You might revisit an old fear, but instead of shrinking, you welcome it as a teacher. This is the gift of the spiral. It transforms what once defeated you into what now empowers you. The eternal spiral is not an endless struggle, it is an endless opening. Each turn invites you to shed another layer, to see with clearer eyes, to love with a fuller heart. It is the path of becoming, and it will continue for as long as you are alive. But instead of exhausting you, it sustains you, because you are no longer fighting it. You are moving with it, trusting its rhythm, knowing that every return is also an arrival. One day, you look back and realize that the spiral has not only changed you, it has become you. You are no longer a person on a journey, you are the journey itself, unfolding in ever-widening circles. And with this realization comes a deep peace, because you understand that there is no need to rush, no need to grasp, no need to fear the next turn. Every loop, every step, every breath is exactly where you are meant to be, and the spiral will keep carrying you deeper into the truth for as long as your soul is willing to walk it. There comes a time when the spiritual journey no longer feels like something separate from your daily life. It stops being a path you walk toward, and becomes the ground you stand on in every moment. Living the awakening is not about transcending the human experience, but about fully inhabiting it with an open heart, a clear mind, and a grounded presence. It is the recognition that enlightenment is not some distant mountaintop you must climb, but the way you choose to meet this moment, and the next, and the one after that. You begin to understand that the essence of awakening is presence. It is in the way you listen without rushing to respond, the way you savor a meal without distraction, the way you feel the wind on your face without needing to capture it for later. It's in the way you pause before reacting, the way you breathe before speaking, the way you notice the smallest details of life and allow them to move you. Presence is no longer a fleeting experience you touch in meditation or quiet moments. It becomes the foundation for how you live. You realize that each moment is alive with possibilities, and when you are here for it fully, you are no longer just existing, you are participating in life as it unfolds. Living the awakening also means embracing the truth that you are both human and infinite. There is a balance to hold between the spiritual awareness that you are more than your body, more than your thoughts, more than your story, and the human reality that you will still feel sadness, frustration, and longing. Awakening doesn't erase these emotions, it changes your relationship to them. You no longer see them as problems to fix or signs of failure, but as part of the rich, textured fabric of being alive. Joy and sorrow, gain and loss, stillness and chaos, all of it belongs. You allow yourself to feel it without clinging and without resistance, knowing that every wave will rise and fall in its own time. This stage is not about retreating from life's challenges, but about meeting them with a deeper trust in yourself and in the flow of existence. You still make mistakes. You still face uncertainty. But you approach these moments differently now. Instead of spiraling into fear or self-judgment, you lean into your awareness. You remember that the same intelligence that moves the stars and turns the tides is moving within you. You respond instead of react. You listen for the quiet guidance beneath the noise. You allow space for grace to enter, even in the messiness of the moment. You also become more intentional about how you move through the world. The values you've cultivated on your spiritual path are no longer ideals you aspire to, they become lived priorities. Compassion is not just something you feel during meditation, it's how you treat the person in front of you, even if they are difficult. Gratitude is not just a list you write in a journal, it's the way you approach your morning, your work, your relationships. Integrity is not just a concept, it's the alignment between your words, your actions, and your truth. You understand that how you live is your offering to the world, and every small choice contributes to the energy you bring into the collective. Living the awakening invites you to let go of the need for constant seeking. You no longer chase experiences to feel whole. You are no longer waiting for the next insight, the next breakthrough, the next stage to finally feel complete. You've discovered that the peace you were looking for has been here all along, in the quiet center of your being. Seeking has its place, and it brought you here, but now the focus is on embodying what you've found. You realize that the most profound spiritual practice is living in alignment with your deepest truth, moment to moment, in all circumstances. There is a simplicity to this way of being. You no longer need to overcomplicate your path with constant analysis or endless techniques. You honor the practices that nourish you, but you do not depend on them to feel connected. Connection is your natural state now. Whether you are sitting in meditation, laughing with a friend, washing the dishes, or walking through a crowded street, you feel the thread of awareness running through it all. Spirituality is no longer something you step into and out of, it is the air you breathe. As you live from this place, you begin to notice how deeply your energy affects those around you. Your calm presence helps others find their own. Your willingness to listen without judgment creates a space where truth can emerge. Your authenticity encourages others to be themselves. You realize that you don't have to preach or convince anyone. Simply being fully yourself is enough to spark something in those ready to awaken in their own way. Living the awakening also means embracing the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. You understand that life will continue to bring changes, challenges, and surprises. Instead of resisting them, you meet them as opportunities for growth and expansion. The need to control every outcome fades because you have learned to trust the unfolding. You know that even when you cannot see the path ahead, you can always take the next step from a place of alignment. This way of living is not about escaping the human story, but about participating in it with your eyes open and your heart unguarded. You find beauty in the imperfection, wisdom in the mistakes, and meaning in the ordinary. You see that the sacred is not reserved for special places or special moments, it is everywhere, waiting to be noticed. And the more you live with that awareness, the more you feel the richness of life itself. Perhaps the most powerful part of living the awakening is realizing that your journey is not just for you, your transformation ripples outward. Every time you choose presence instead of distraction, compassion instead of judgment, love instead of fear, you shift the energy of the world in a small but meaningful way. You are no longer simply a participant in life, you are a conscious co-creator, and in that role, you understand the responsibility and privilege of shaping the reality you inhabit. So, as you stand here, at this point in your path, the invitation is clear. Live it, live what you know to be true. Live with your heart open, your mind clear, and your presence rooted in this moment. Let your life be the evidence of your awakening, not because you have all the answers, but because you are willing to meet each day with awareness, courage, and love. You are not waiting for a perfect moment to begin, you are living it now. And as you do, you become a reminder to others of what is possible. You show that awakening is not an escape from life, but a deeper, fuller embrace of it. You show that we can live in alignment without abandoning our humanity, that we can be both grounded and infinite, both ordinary and extraordinary. You show that the path is not something we find, but something we choose, over and over again, in every breath, in every choice, in every step forward. So step forward, not towards some faraway peak, but into the life already unfolding before you. Bring your whole self to it. Let your awakening be lived, here and now, in the only moment that has ever truly mattered, this one.